Winter came hard to Powhatan that year, the kind of cold that rolled up off the Black River and settled into the floorboards of Tobias Winslow's mercantile like an uninvited guest. It was December of 1886, and the little river town, county seat of Lawrence County, Arkansas, and once the busiest steamboat landing between Pocahontas and Jacksonport, had already seen its first hard frost. 10-year-old Jasper Merryweather stood near the stove, trying to warm feet that could barely feel the heat anymore. His left boot had split clean across the sole. He'd stuffed it with a folded page of the Powhatan Courier to keep the gravel out, and the toe of his right boot had been re-sewn with wax twine so many times it had gone stiff as a plank. "Cold enough for you today, Jasper?" Tobias Winslow asked kindly, weighing out a pound of coffee for Beatrice Merryweather at the counter. "Yes, sir," Jasper said, "but I don't mind it much." It was a brave lie. They both knew it. Beatrice counted her coins carefully. 3 dimes, a nickel, and 4 worn pennies. Enough for coffee and a small sack of cornmeal, nothing more. Her hands, chapped raw from tanning hides in cold water, trembled slightly as she slid the money across the glass. The mercantile door swung open. A gust of river wind carried in the rustle of expensive wool. Ophelia Fenwick, wife of the town's banker, and her friend Beulah Radnor stepped inside, their new kid leather boots clicking sharp against the floor. Ophelia's eyes drifted down to Jasper's feet. Her mouth curled. "Land's sake, Beulah, would you look at those soles flap?" Ophelia said, not troubling to lower her voice. "That boy's walking on cardboard and prayer." Beulah covered her mouth, but the laugh escaped anyway, sharp and bright against the tin ceiling. "I do believe the Merryweather name has fallen further than that old colonel's grave marker." Jasper stared at the floor. His ears burned red. In the shadowed corner by the wood stove, unnoticed, a tall man in a plain canvas coat set down his coffee cup and went very still. To understand why the words cut so deep, you have to understand who the Merryweathers once were. Jasper's grandfather, Colonel Absalom Merryweather, had ridden into history at the Battle of Prairie Grove in December of 1862, holding a frozen ridge with 60 men until reinforcements arrived. He came home a legend. The town later set a small bronze plaque near the courthouse steps in his honor, a plaque that collected frost every winter and admiration from no one who could actually spare a dollar. Absalom died 8 years ago, leaving behind a name people still tip their hats to and a small tannery mortgaged to the rafters. His son, Nathaniel Merryweather, Beatrice's husband, had taken over the saddlery, teaching himself fine leatherwork from his father's old journals. He was gentle, clever with his hands, and utterly devoted to Beatrice and their boy. Then came the river fever, 2 winters back. It took Nathaniel in 11 days. Beatrice was left with a half-finished mortgage, a 10-year-old son, and a trade she'd only ever watched her husband practice. She taught herself the rest: stitching, tanning, the careful art of shaping leather to fit a foot or a hand. She took in mending work from the ranches outside town, charging fair prices and never once asking for pity. Jasper's boots had been his father's, cut down and resold twice already. There simply wasn't money left over for new ones. Not with the bank's payment due the first of every month, and not with Corwin Fenwick, the bank manager, adding what he called processing charges whenever her payment fell short by even a few cents. Beatrice knew the boots on her son's feet were poor. Jasper knew it too. But they were Merryweathers, and Merryweathers did not complain even when a banker's wife laughed loud enough to be heard clear down Main Street. "Mrs. Fenwick is right about the cardboard," Beatrice would tell Jasper that night. "But she's wrong about everything else that matters." Beatrice took Jasper's hand. "We're finished here, Mr. Winslow. Thank you kindly," she said, and steered her son toward the door without once looking at Ophelia Fenwick. They stepped out into the wind, past a tall man they never noticed standing near the stove. His name was Samuel Brackenridge, and by any measure in Lawrence County, cattle, timberland, or hard cash, he was the wealthiest man for 50 miles in any direction. He ran nearly 2,000 head on the Brackenridge Range along the Black River bottom south of town, shipped beef downriver on the steamboats twice a season, and employed more hands than the courthouse had clerks. Yet he wore a mud-splashed canvas coat and boots resoled more than once himself, and most strangers took him for a hired man rather than the owner of the whole outfit. He had a daughter of his own, 9-year-old Josephine, whom everyone called Josie, and since his wife had passed 3 winters back, the girl was the entire compass of his world. If anyone had ever spoken to Josie the way Ophelia Fenwick had just spoken to that boy, Samuel knew exactly what he would have done, and it would not have been quiet. But Beatrice Merryweather had done something harder than fighting. She had simply absorbed the blow and walked her son out the door with her chin level. Samuel set down his coffee cup and crossed to the counter. "Tobias," he said, "how much boot leather have you got in that back room?" Winslow blinked. "Near on 80 pounds, Mr. Brackenridge. Whole shipment came up from Batesville last week." "I'll take all of it, and every finished pair of boots you've got in a boy's size 6. Ophelia's smile faltered. "Surely you don't mean—" Samuel looked at her the way a man looks at weather he doesn't care for. "I mean exactly what I said, ma'am. Wrap it up, Tobias. Load it in my wagon." He turned and walked out, leaving the mercantile in a silence sharper than the cold outside. Samuel had ridden into Powhatan that morning to sign papers on a timber lease. By the time he tied his horse outside the Lawrence County Bank, the papers no longer mattered. The bank sat at the corner of Main and Court, a squat brick building that smelled of ink, cigar smoke, and quiet ambition. Behind the teller's cage sat Corwin Fenwick, a narrow man who preferred ledgers to people and had married into just enough respectability to forget he hadn't been born with it. "Mr. Brackenridge," Fenwick said, rising with a practiced smile, "I have your lease agreement ready." "That'll keep," Samuel said. "I want to see the Merryweather account." Fenwick's smile thinned. "That's a private matter, sir. Bank policy." "Show me the ledger, Corwin." Something in Samuel's voice, flat, unhurried, entirely without threat, made Fenwick's hand shake as he pulled the heavy book from the drawer and slid it across the counter. Samuel's finger traced down the column. The original loan, taken out by Nathaniel Merryweather to buy tanning supplies, had been for $180. The balance now read just short of $400. "What's this here? A $12 penalty in October?" "Mrs. Merryweather was short by a dime," Fenwick said. "The bank cannot afford sentiment. She was short a dime, and you charged her $12. It is standard practice for accounts in arrears." Samuel closed the ledger. The thud echoed through the empty lobby. He understood now. This had nothing to do with dimes. The Merryweather land sat squarely on the finest natural landing along that stretch of the Black River, exactly where a rail spur would need to reach the water. He pulled a roll of bills from his coat and counted out the full balance onto the desk. "The debt's paid. Write the receipt." Fenwick's pen trembled as he wrote, "This is highly irregular, Mr. Brackenridge. So is stealing from a widow, Corwin. Remember that." 2 miles outside town, where the road narrowed to a rutted track along the river bluff, the Merryweather place sat small and neat behind a stand of bare sycamores. The porch sagged on one end, but the woodpile was stacked straight as a soldier's rifle rack. Beatrice was at her workbench when the dog barked, a heavy wagon rolling into the yard. Her stomach dropped. Wagons usually meant trouble. She opened the door to find Samuel Brackenridge climbing down, his own daughter Josie beside him in a blue wool coat, and the wagon bed loaded with leather and boot boxes. "Mr. Brackenridge," Beatrice said carefully, "if you've come to offer charity, you can turn that wagon right back around. We manage our own affairs." "I'm not a charitable man, Mrs. Merryweather," Samuel said, removing his hat despite the cold. "I'm a practical one. I bought out Winslow's entire leather stock this morning, and I've got 40 ranch hands who'll need new gloves and boots before spring roundup. I hear you're the finest leather worker between here and Pocahontas. I'd like to hire you, fair wages, by the pair." Beatrice stared at the wagon, then at him. "And the boots in that box? Those are already made. Your boy's size, near enough. Consider the first pair a signing bonus." He glanced toward the doorway, where Jasper stood watching. "I'd also mention your loan's been settled in full, paid this morning." Beatrice's breath caught. "Mr. Brackenridge, that's $400, and it's spoken for already, in leather work. Don't argue with me, ma'am. I've had a long morning." He turned toward the wagon, then stopped, and looked back at the river bend below the property line. "One more thing. Have you had strangers out this way lately? Men with survey stakes?" Beatrice hesitated. "Last week, near the old boundary marker. I thought they were lost." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Men like that are never lost, Mrs. Merryweather. Lock your doors tonight." That night, the Merryweather kitchen felt warmer than it had in months. Beatrice sat by the lamp, cutting the first pair of small boots down to size, her needle flashing through good, honest leather instead of thin, tired wool. Jasper was meant to be asleep, but he sat up on his cot, watching. "Ma, is Mr. Brackenridge going to shoot Mr. Fenwick?" Beatrice almost laughed. "No, sweetheart. Good men don't shoot bankers over money. Grandpa Absalom shot people. That was a war. This is a river landing." She bit off her thread. "Besides, I suspect Mr. Brackenridge knows worse things to do to a banker than shoot him." Jasper seemed satisfied. He lay back down, and the steady rhythm of the needle soon carried him to sleep. By the time the mantel clock struck 2, Beatrice had finished the boots. They were sturdy, double-stitched at the heel, lined with soft deer hide at the ankle. She set them by the door, then remembered Samuel's warning. She walked to the corner cabinet, opened it, and took down her late husband's shotgun. She loaded it in the dark, the clicks loud in the quiet house, and sat by the window with the weapon across her lap. An hour passed. Then the dog began to bark, sharp, frantic. Beatrice moved to the window, keeping to the shadow of the frame. Down by the river landing, near the old stone boundary marker her father-in-law had set 50 years before, 2 lanterns swung in the dark. Men were walking her land, straight toward the marker. One carried a sledgehammer. She understood instantly. Move the marker upriver, and the best natural landing on the property would fall outside her line and onto county ground. No need to buy the farm at all. Just steal the water frontage clean. Beatrice did not hesitate. She stepped onto the porch, raised the shotgun, and pulled back both hammers. The click rang out sharp and clear across the frozen yard. "Step away from that marker," she shouted. The 2 men froze, then turned toward the porch. "Go on inside, lady," one called, his voice rough. "County business. This is Merryweather land," Beatrice answered, "and you are trespassing." The man with the sledgehammer laughed, low and ugly. "Not for long, it ain't." He hefted the hammer and swung it toward the old marker stone. Beatrice aimed high, above his head, and fired. The shot cracked across the valley like a rifle of thunder, snow showering down from the branches overhead. The man dropped the hammer. His partner drew a revolver and leveled it toward the porch. "The next one goes lower," Beatrice said, her hands shaking, but the barrel steady. Before the gunman could answer, Hoofbeats tore through the tree line. 4 riders broke from the shadows of the ridge, moving fast, carrying ropes instead of lanterns. At the front rode Samuel Brackenridge on a black gelding, driving straight between the men and the river landing. His foreman, a broad-shouldered rider named Otis Bramwell, uncoiled a lariat and dropped it over the gunman's shoulders with a single easy flick. One hard jerk sent the man sprawling into the snow, his revolver skittering away. Samuel reined in beside the man with the sledgehammer. "Pick that back up," he said quietly. The man obeyed, hands trembling. "Now walk. Straight to town. You stop before you reach the bank. Otis here will finish the walk for you." Dragging. Otis smiled, and it was not a kind smile. The 2 men fled up the frozen road, leaving their lanterns behind. Samuel walked his horse up to the porch. Beatrice still held the smoking shotgun. "I told you to lock your doors, Mrs. Merryweather," he said mildly. "I did," she said. They were outside. A small smile crossed his face. Colonel Absalom would have been proud of that shot. He looked toward town. "Get some sleep if you can. Come morning, we're going to see the banker." Morning broke pale and clear over Powhatan. The mercantile was already busy with coffee and gossip when a heavy wagon rolled down Main Street. Samuel Brackenridge at the reins, Beatrice beside him, and 6 Brackenridge riders trailing behind, hard-faced and silent. The wagon stopped in front of the bank. The street went quiet. Samuel helped Beatrice down. Then, from the wagon bed, Jasper Merryweather climbed out, wearing a brand-new pair of boots, dark leather gleaming, the stitching straight and strong. He stood tall in them, and for the first time in a long while, he did not look at the ground. Ophelia Fenwick, standing on the boardwalk with her coffee, saw the boots and went pale. Inside the bank, Corwin Fenwick rose from his desk, eyeing the riders through the window. "Mr. Brackenridge, you cannot bring armed men."
"They're not armed," Samuel said, and the men opened their coats to prove it.
"They're witnesses, and they have a confession to deliver." He set a signed paper on the desk, the 2 trespassers' account of who had hired them. Fenwick's face went the color of old paper. "This proves nothing. The railroad needs that landing. If Mrs. Merryweather won't sell, the county will condemn the land regardless. Even you can't stop the Iron Mountain line, Mr. Brackenridge." "Corwin," Samuel said calmly, "who do you suppose is paying for that spur?" The room went silent. "The steel comes from St. Louis. The crosties come from my own timberland. And the money, every dollar of it, comes from me. You spent 6 months trying to steal land out from under a company I already own." Fenwick sank into his chair. Samuel turned and handed Beatrice a sealed document. "A 10-year lease, Mrs. Merryweather. $500 a year for the river landing rights." Beatrice's hands shook as she took it. "Mr. Brackenridge, say yes." "Yes." Samuel looked back at Fenwick. "You'll resign and be out of Powhatan by sundown, or every dollar of Brackenridge money leaves this bank by noon." Fenwick had nothing left to say. By spring, the frost had lifted from the black river bottoms, and new rail ties stretched toward the landing, where 2 men had once tried to steal a widow's water frontage under lantern light. Corwin and Ophelia Fenwick left Powhatan before the first thaw, and no one in town much mourned their leaving. Beatrice Merryweather kept her farm. She hired help to mend the porch and the roof, and she kept working leather at her bench, boots and gloves for the Brackenridge outfit, fine saddle work besides, never once accepting a dollar more than what was fairly earned. It was a matter of pride, same as it had always been. Samuel Brackenridge visited often, sitting on the repaired porch with a cup of coffee while Jasper and Josie ran through the new spring grass, his daughter teaching the boy to whistle for her pony. He never spoke again of the loan, or the bank, or the night on the river landing. They simply understood one another, two people who knew the value of quiet strength. Years later, when Jasper Merryweather packed a trunk to study law in Little Rock, he brought his grandfather's faded parchment, a photograph of his father's saddle shop and, folded carefully at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, one small cracked boot sole, kept to remember a hard winter and the tall rancher who'd refused to let cruelty stand. And that brings Jasper's story to a close. I hope this ride back to 1886 Arkansas gave you a chance to step away from today and sit with a story of quiet dignity for a while. Were you sipping coffee, relaxing on your porch, or winding down for the evening? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. Let me know what state or what country you're watching from tonight. And if this story moved you even a little, hit that like button and subscribe now. There's a new tale of the Old West waiting for you every week. Thank you for spending this time with me.